All right, so one of my favorite guys to talk to on this podcast, we always appreciate his time. He's got great insight, and that is Joe Henricksen, City Suburban Hoops Report and Chicago Sun-Times contributor. Follow him on Twitter at Joe Hoops Report. Well, Joe, we're kind of back to focus on some prep basketball recruiting. I made that point on this podcast a little bit. It's nice to see some preps get some shine in this era of the transfer portal getting most of the focus.
Yeah, and also for Illinois specifically, because you're talking about a program, and not to the fault of their own, because there have not been a ton of high major prospects of late in Illinois. And here they are, got on board with a top ranked prospect early on, secured him, and it's played out perfectly for them. They've got a relationship that's not even a question of, basketball is different than football. Football, there's always that concern of decommitments and taking other visits, and basketball is not that way. But Morez just continues to climb. Morez Johnson is without question the top prospect in Illinois, from the Chicago area here, and boom, they locked him up early, and he's flourishing. He's shining. And Illinois fans, the coaching staff, anybody involved in Illinois recruiting, which is a second sport for fans, it's got to be ecstatic, because I just think Morez is everything to do with winning. He is about all the right things. I know it keeps being said over and over again, but it's the one attribute I don't think you can talk enough about, because it's what makes programs tick. It makes what programs win. And he brings all those intangibles. Does he have things to work on? Yes, but he's physically ready from day one. I can't even imagine what he's going to be like with Fletch and what college strength and conditioning program is going to do for him. But it's what's in his head. What's in his head is, just he wants to do all the things others don't want to do. And you get a big man that are already hard to come by in this day and age. It's just a huge win for Illinois and a boon for, this recruiting class, whatever it ends up being.
Heck, it was almost 2 years ago, Joe, that he committed. And we asked you on this podcast what you thought of him, and you were a fan of him then. And he's kind of a throwback. It kind of reminds me like the Tracy Abrams days of kids committing this early. It's pretty big rarity nowadays. But what kind of development have you seen from him during the last year, particularly what's been on display in the national stage the last couple of weeks with the NBA PA Top 100 camp and then Peach Jam?
I think it's a combination of assertiveness and confidence, and he was always a confident player because he was a high-profile kid early on. But it's that assertiveness and the production going from here and there to, okay, I'm doing this every single day in terms of numbers, the effort, the energy, but figuring it out, how to do it, how to get it done. I think he's matured in that way, and utilizing his strengths. High school players have a tough time sometimes understanding them true selves of who they are as a player and what is going to lead to production. Morez doesn't try to do too much, and I think that I think he was doing that early in his career, trying to do a little bit too much out of his comfort zone, trying to be a little too perimeter oriented. I think he went to, use that blue collar approach to his benefit, and that's why he's progressed in terms of productivity. Does he have room to grow as a player? Yeah, all high school players do. Is he a pretty unpolished offensive player right now? Yes, but there's things that he can do without having that ideal skill set to still produce, and that is get on the glass, loose balls, keep balls alive, run in transition, finish, all these things that he can do with his physical attributes and strengths. He's doing it at a high level right now.
Yeah, Joe, and it's just all that stuff seems to translate to the college game and the college role that he will have. Like if he reminds me a little bit of Ty Rodgers. If you rebound, defend, you focus on those
very similar.
Things, yeah, you're going to find a way to get on the court. But we do think, at least most people I talk to think there's another level he can get to. So for his development, what do you think is the key for Illinois once he gets here to develop him and to complement him on the court?
Well, the complement part is very important with what pieces you put around him inside the 4 and the 5 and interchangeable. Ideally, what you'd love for Morez to be able to do is be that interchangeable 4-5, and he's got to be more of that 4. I just think the decision making with the ball in his hands, that coupled with just being able to stick that little jump. It's not broke. That jumper has ways to go. But if he can showcase a little bit of that from the skill area, that's going to raise his level, because he's not the somewhat of an issue would be, he's not 6'10", 6'11". He's 6'8", 6'8 and a half. And he is more 5 to me right now than 4. Some probably will disagree with me on that, but that's just how I see it. But again, we can get back to being that interchangeable big man piece. I think that's going to be a huge advantage for him and any coaching staff that can utilize him in that way.
He's one of the few kids who's sticking around in state here, Joe.
Yes.
He goes from St. Rita to Thornton, going to play with Ty Streets, who obviously is coached with Mean Streets at Thornton. What do you expect out of him, or what do you want to see out of him as a senior?
Well, kudos for Morez. I mean, he if you ever talk to him, he is everybody is said a lot, the cliche, great kid. Man, he is. I mean, besides being about the right things, just the way he articulates things to you and what is important to him stood out to me, even during that whole, everybody gets uptight about all the transfers in high school basketball now. They forced this kid's hand. I mean, the program was in shambles. The coach left. I mean, it was just a bad situation at St. Rita. But to his credit, he found the importance of what it means to stay home, to play and be around family and friends. And that's not the mindset of top flight players around the country, and even in the state, as we've seen. There is something of value to him to do that here. So, Thornton is a little bit of a rebuild. They've added 2 other transfers. So, I have an event in January, when sides collide. Thornton will be in it, and I'm excited because I think they're going to be, obviously with Morez, but they could be a potential top 10 team from a team that really wasn't very good, very uncharacteristic like. But Morez is just what he is. He's going to be a Mr. Basketball front runner. And it's going to be interesting to see how he can put that team on his back, because there were so many pieces at St. Rita, even though he was the key figure at St. Rita with James Brown and Noyes Indecitus and all these high majors, but he's kind of the sole guy at Thornton now. So it'll be interesting to see just kind of how he handles that role as a senior.
Joe, we've talked about the state's best talent leaving the state. Like, we've talked about it a lot, and it continues to happen, but we want them to stay here so we can see them. I think there's a great history of high school basketball in the state now, being back in Champaign for the state championships. But does this help them to leave? Like, what are the benefits and negatives of this for the kids?
I ask this question with college coaches all the time, and it's almost always off the record. They don't, and every situation is so different, Jeremy. So it's hard to paint a brush for everybody, because, but by and large, I have just kind of heard that, and in my opinion, it kind of goes with this. I just look at Jalen Brunson still did what he did. Max Christie did what he did. I don't think there's one avenue that is perfect. Right. It just comes down to what's important to, Cole Serta at Bloomington Central Catholic has decided to leave, to go IMG. I mean, me personally, that's their decision. In Notre Dame, I mean, all these different schools have different opinions of what they should and shouldn't do. And I just don't know if there's a specific, I'm not really answering your question very well. I don't like it, but I'm just so biased.
Right.
I talked to a coach the other day. He goes, Joe, just get somebody that can rebound for him in the gym. Go work out. There's just so much value to being the piece at the guy at your high school, and playing some high stakes games that matter with you as the focal point, as opposed to maybe going to a prep school somewhere and being the 6th man or 7th man, not being able to do that. But then again, there's some situations where kids are playing practice against nobody all day long at a very low level, and they're practicing every day, competing against Division I players every day in practice. So it goes beyond just the games. Right. So there's value. I get it. I just don't think it's the be all end all, and it's proven that it doesn't have to be that way by some of those. I could go on and on with names like Jalen Brunson and Max Christie and Cameron Christie and even Jeremy Fears to a degree. Left, came back. I don't like when I hear reasons being for McDonald's nominations, rankings, and I hear that more than the development piece, to be honest. Right. So that stuff is just like, come on, who cares? But all that stuff is because you're getting that high level play and competition, Jeremy, in AAU. I mean, it's right. And McDonald's games, they really don't care how you do as a senior in high school. That's all established and done prior to that. They're not even seen in high school much. So anyway, it's just a wide range of answers for individual kids.
Joe, I want to ask you about a few other kids in state. Illinois showing a lot of interest in. Jason Jakstys, 2024 big man out of Yorkville, Illinois, comes in with one of his first high major offers here. What kind of development have you seen on him? Because he's the kind of guy, if he did develop, you think would be a good compliment to somebody like Morez, it feels like.
Yeah. And, I'm a straight shooter with all in my recruiting service, and I have him as a mid-major, I get what people see. I'm actually from Yorkville, but grew up there, and you've seen his development over the years as this late blooming, developing big 6'10". I see what Illinois sees in him. I look at the past experiments of the Leibs and the Jermaine Hamlins and the flyers you take, and you hope one of them hits. He would not be ready for a while at a Big Ten school. He just has, from a physical standpoint, particularly. But yeah, he this past weekend, he started good, kind of faded a little bit. What's interesting, and again, I give credit to Illinois. They do what they want to do, and in terms of, and that's what all college programs should do. But again, usually when a high major offers, a lot foul. Yeah. It just happens. You just saw it this weekend with Angel Ciaravino from Mount Carmel. Finally, one offered, and boom, 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 3-4 others followed right away. Jakstys came out this weekend. Still, he's a coveted mid-major guy. Mid-majors would love to have him. I still think he's a developmental piece at the mid-major level. That's going to take some time, but he's a skill big 6'10". He can move. Just physically is not ready, and the productivity, the consistent production is partly the lack of it to a degree as a result of that lack of physicality and body strength and trying to survive on that circuit when the level rises up. Yeah. But a lot of high majors are doing things differently now, Jeremy. The recruiting model is different. And this isn't specifically towards Jakstys in Illinois, but there are 13 scholarships, and you cannot keep 13 players happy nowadays. You just can't. Right. There's a lot of programs that don't want 13. They want, 12. Keep one open. There's the NIL factor. Can you back end that roster with some NIL guys that aren't going to chew up any money? You try to find ones that are, again, like a player like Jakstys, not specifically him, but maybe is okay with the idea of sitting, redshirting, developing, and again, with all those other things, not eating up NIL, not, there's just a puzzle now in recruiting and roster management that is way different than it was just 3 years ago. And I'm not saying that's what Illinois sees. I'm just saying that's the case, and that's how I view a lot of these scholarship situations at the high major level.
No, I've thought, man, could Illinois get back to more in-state recruiting, because those guys might stay around a little bit longer. In developmental pieces, you might have 1 or 2 spots available for that. So I don't disagree with that thought. I want to ask you too. I mean, when your name's Gill, you're in Illinois, you're a pretty good basketball player. A lot of fans are going to notice. Illinois offered Phoenix Gill last year. Doesn't do the AAU thing, which I find really interesting with Kendall and Phoenix's decision on that, but seemed to have pretty good event at Riverside Brookfield. So what have you made of his development over the past year, Joe?
It's interesting, the AAU thing. And again, I don't think there's a one road or one fit for every kid and family. But it is interesting because I have morphed as an evaluator over the years from being like, I don't know what the percentage would be, 60-40 high school favorable to watch versus now like 70-30 AAU or 60-40 AAU. And now I value getting both of them so much that you miss it when you don't see it. So I'd love to see, Phoenix Gill play on the circuit, and because it does it's two different animals,
right?
But there are higher level athletes, there are higher level players that are all on one court together. It's just fact. So he's just been super steady. He hasn't had this massive rise. It's just the steady progression. He, the one thing, and I hate when you have to compare to other players, let alone your own father. He doesn't have that explosiveness, the type of athleticism that Kendall had, but he's probably a little small right now. But again, he's still maturing physically, developing. I think he's getting more athletic each time I see him. I have him right in that mid plus, high minus range on the bubble of becoming a legit high major. And I just think he's a ton of substance to him. And I just think he's not going to be this flashy, eye-opening player, but one that you really, really gravitate towards the more you watch. And so it'll be interesting to see, his rise this year, because I love the jumps they make, from that classification from when you finish in March till November. And I expect him at St. Ignatius to have that type of a jump, even without that AAU experience.
Feels like substance would be a really high remark by an evaluator, Joe.
Yeah. Well, and we talk about Ty Rogers, we talk about Morez Johnson, not that they don't have other things, but there is a ton of substance to those two kids. And, I don't know, every roster is built differently. Every coach has importance of characteristics and attributes, and they say every coach is going to say they want that, right, but every program in the country does not have it.
Joe, I want to ask you about a guy who is transferring out of state but played in state last year, Jeremiah Fears. I saw him, I think, a year ago, and I was like, oh, this is the Steph Curry generation. Jeremiah Fears feels like he is a part of that. Just shot maker, playmaker. But what have you seen from his development? Because it seems like Illinois has started to prioritize him.
Same stage. Again, we're comparing family members here, but same stage. I from the day I saw Jeremiah, I've liked Jeremiah every step of the way as a higher level prospect and player than Jeremy. Jeremiah is my cup of tea. He is my type of player, bucket getter, plays with a pace that I love while also staying in control. And he's a bona fide, legitimate high major. I'd love for him to add another inch, and you get nitpicky with size and stuff, but he's plenty big enough as far as a high major. But yeah, he's electric, and he's been playing up, obviously, an age group at AAU. It's disappointing. I would love to have seen him. He'd be by far away my top ranked prospect in that class if he were still in Illinois. So yeah, he's a no-brainer, high major. I think he's on his way to being a potential, McDonald's All-American, which Jeremy was as well. I just think Jeremiah is a better player, a better prospect, and a higher upside.
Joe, before I let you go, I do want to touch on the big picture of the transfer portal in all of this. How has it impacted high school recruiting from what you've seen?
Oh, big time. But I think it's about to change a little bit, Jeremy, with the COVID year being gone, coming up another year early. But and I keep repeating this in interviews I do and stuff, but you do the math, 350, 360 Division I programs, they average 2.5 seniors on a roster. All those kids are able to come back. Do the math, 800, 900 scholarships that are floating out there or eaten up by these kids that college coaches want because they've got 4 years of college experience under their belt. So that's 900 scholarships that are, being utilized that otherwise wouldn't be there. And somebody feels the effect of that, and that is junior college kids and high school players. So I think it'll clear that'll clear up a little bit going forward here after we get through the COVID kids of the extra year of eligibility. I think smart high school kids and families and their people are realizing not to play around anymore. If you find a fit, you find a place that you really like, you need to snap it up. Last year's class year, I mean, I have to go back and look, but of my top 20 prospects, I think 19 of them were committed by the time school started.
Hmm.
And if you go back 3, 4, 5 years ago, there were always, I could go back to the previous year and where they were still taking visits in September and taking their officials, first week in October. And that used to be the time where college coaches put everything in, get them in on a football weekend, get the sign, seal, and get it done, And some of the high profile kids are still doing that. But those low majors and mid majors, they would even try to, work that and manage those weekends. And now families are like, you know what? We like this place. We got a great opportunity. This is a great fit academically, socially, basketball wise. Boom, let's get this done. So I think that sped up the process a little bit. Meanwhile, what's pushing back is some of the colleges are whoa, slow down. We want to, manage our roster. We want to see what we have because we want to see what we get in the portal in the spring. So it is a little, odd that the two forces are coming together in that way, but it's definitely changed. It's altered everything. In springtime, it's just a mess. It's just, the calendar is proposed for recruiting is to clear up April for college coaches. There won't be any live periods next April if it's approved, where there's 2 live weekends now. So those college coaches and I can't get over being involved with the way I am. And I know they've cited this too in interviews, probably with you, and you've heard it from the Illinois staff, just the intensity it is from March to early May. It's wild. And the hours that used to be their downtime. And now you're going.
Most of them not even going on the trail right now for high school, right? Because they got to recruit their own roster or recruit the transfers.
Yeah, those live weekends are really dead in terms of their evaluations are only half because they're like this the entire time checking the portal, and the 2 other staff members are on campus hosting a transfer, and they're not even out. So that'll be good, to let the college coaches focus on the portal in the spring. I think there's 1 live period in May. That's the proposal. So that'll alleviate a little bit of it. But yeah, your original question is changed wholeheartedly with, and as a result, there were already fewer Division I players coming out of Illinois because of the talent. And then that is even exasperated by the fact of what I said earlier with all these 5th-year guys that were lurking still around. College coaches didn't want a high school kid for the last 2-3 years. If they could avoid it, they just didn't. Because why am I going to take a high school kid, develop him, have him transfer for one, or if I have an option of taking a kid who's played at, if I'm a high major that's played at George Mason for 3 years, or if I'm at Illinois State, somebody who's played at Austin P for 4 years. And it's just, you want the high school man, you want the veteran that's been through the wars and the grind and knows what they're getting with them.
You mentioned Illinois State there, Joe. This is the last one I got for you. Do you feel like it all evens out for the mid-major at the end? Because obviously the frustration of developing somebody and then they just go to the next place with the immediate transfer rule, but they also get the people on the way down. So does it even out?
No, I don't. I think it's the worst job in college basketball. Worst job in college basketball to me is a mid-major head coach and a high major with no NIL money. And there are programs that are struggling NIL money in high major level even still. So I know what you're saying, yes.
Yeah.
But there's so many question marks with those high majors that are coming down. Either they never played or they didn't fit in, or where what you got as a mid-major with this kid that you that you have recruited, you got to know, you've developed, you've seen them play, they've been in your locker room for 2-3 years. That's hard to lose. And I just think I'm coming out with an article here, Jeremy, in a little bit, that how we're never, ever, 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 ever going to see the Southern Illinois that we saw from Rich Herron to Bruce Weber to Chris Lowry to it's just those runs I just can't see ever happening again, because those players that were there were some stud players, some dudes that would never have stuck around.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them might have, but some of those stars those are pros. They were going to leave. They were going to go the high major route. And the other thing you can't afford to do too much anymore, Jeremy, at the mid-major level is redshirt. I mean,
all right,
you're asking yourself for trouble for the most part. If you're sitting the kid, letting him develop, getting nothing out of him, then he comes as a redshirt freshman, plays a little, and then boom, he's gone. It's really hard to go that route. Some cases you still have to, but it's just I feel, and they don't, the mid majors are scrapping. The low majors don't have hardly any NIL. So the mid majors feel like, I mean, there's some that have 100 to 200,000 in their coffers, and some that have chump change. So it's the same way at the high major level too, but not as much.
Yeah. Joe Henricksen, City Suburban Hoops Report, Chicago Sun-Times contributor. You can follow him on Twitter at Joe Hoops Report. Joe, always appreciate the chats and the insight, man. Appreciate the time.
Hey, Jeremy, I appreciate it anytime.